Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SportsTalk Philadelphia. We are back after our month-long winter break. My name is Tyler Harper. I am your host here today. And with me, a great panel to start off the new year. We've got Mark Wilson, Jordan Green, and Tommy McIntyre. Guys, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to get the show underway. But I'm not so excited. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, you haven't been that excited because, well, since Thanksgiving, really. Let's take a look at the full screen graphic and see what happened. The Eagles 1-3 after Thanksgiving win over Dallas. Losses to Seattle, losses to the Cowboys, a loss to Washington. Guys, I'm going to start simple and expand. What went wrong in these 3 weeks after Thanksgiving?
I think a lot kind of went wrong, especially in the defense. Out of those 5 games, including the game on Thanksgiving against Dallas, the Eagles went 2-3, but they gave up 24 more points in all those games except that Dallas game on Thanksgiving where they only gave up 10 points. So for me, it'd be the defense, especially the third down play. That's where the season went wrong.
Yeah, I knew they were in trouble when Benny Logan was talking as if this was the Super Bowl for the Eagles. And, you know, it was a big game. All division games are big games, but at the end of the day, they had bigger tests ahead. And their true colors got shown for the most part. The secondary, while I like the front seven, the secondary just couldn't hold up against the likes of Seattle, against Dallas the second time. And, you know, they just got exposed. You got to be able to punch it in the red zone if you want to win games.
Going back to that, you made the mention of Benny Logan's comment of this was our Super Bowl. Do you think that's a lack of maturity from the younger guys? Because obviously Benny Logan's been on the team for a couple years, but he's still learning in the NFL.
I don't blame him. It's just I would have chose different words. I wouldn't have said this was our Super Bowl, but the Dallas offensive line was getting a lot of hype, and the Eagles front seven is pretty underrated, I would say. And they owned him that day, so he had every right to kind of feel himself a little bit. But at the end of the day, when they played Seattle and when they played Dallas again, they got smacked, and that's when it mattered most.
That's true. Tommy, what went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think after the Dallas game, the Thanksgiving game, we were on like a high. We were like, wow, this is great. We're going into Seattle. And that Seattle game was really when you're like, okay, we've really got to get our acts together, playing Dallas again. And after that Seattle game, it just seemed like we came back to earth, and it was the Dallas game. You just didn't see the same team on Thanksgiving, and it was basically after that point, I was like, we weren't really as good as people have always claimed us to be, because the wins we got in the season, yeah, we beat the Colts, but we beat the Colts when they were early in the year struggling, and it wasn't like the Colts were ever a fantastic team the whole season either. So our wins weren't against the greatest team outside of some of our division teams. So I think we weren't as good as we thought we were. And I think our offense, obviously, when you lose Nick Foles, you have to have Mark Sanchez. We need him to do what he did with the Jets when he had a solid defense, but then our defense wasn't that good.
Once upon a time, that was long ago.
Yeah,
man.
And our defense, or like Jordan said about our secondary, needs improvements desperately. And Nate Allen should not be one of our starting safeties, and you got to get rid of Brandon Fletcher as well. So a lot of problems, a lot of improvements need to be made, and I think that's what we kind of saw.
You mentioned the wins and losses. We got some key wins. Really, one of our key big wins, you mentioned it was week 2 against somewhat a Colts team that stumbled out at the gate. But, how telling is that, and I guess, Tommy, we'll start with you on this, of this team, the fact that they got wins against teams they need to get wins against, but for the most part, the bigger level teams like San Francisco early in the year, but Seattle, Dallas, these bigger teams that like Arizona, these bigger teams, they eventually edged us out in the end. They just had us beat. Like, what does that say about this team?
Yeah, that was early in the year, and those games were, we were in those games. You mentioned 49ers game, you mentioned Arizona game. We had those, we could have won those games.
Right.
But at the same time, I think we had this discussion early in the season of like, wow, we could be like 6-0, and we also could have been like 1-5 at the same time, because it was just like the games could have tilted either way, and it was just it seemed like we were almost just getting by, and I think as the season went on, and then as you saw the end of the streak, we kind of fell apart, and I think that's kind of what the team was.
Right.
The team's kind of incomplete at this point in time. You see some things you really like. Again, we talked about the front seven, and they move the ball in between the 20s, but once they get into the 20s, they just seem to stutter. It's a good sign that they're beating the teams that they're supposed to beat, because that's something Andy Reid wasn't able to do later in his tenure. They were losing all sorts of mediocre teams. But again, it was kind of a puts you back into reality that once they got on the national stage against the likes of a Seattle, that they could come up so short. And, you know, it was a historical collapse for a team that starts off 9-3, for them to not even make the playoffs, just to kind of stumble in the fashion that they did. It's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, the Eagles are always really interesting to watch in the fact that we brought up that they can beat these really good teams throughout the year. And then there's other times, like we said, we watched them lose to the Redskins at the end of the year, and Redskins were an awful, awful team this year. And then, you know, they beat Dallas mercilessly on Thanksgiving. That was a national stage game where, you know, everyone was watching because that was the only game that was on. But then, you know, they beat Dallas, you know, the big division game. But then they go in Seattle and get walked over. Sanchez only threw for 96 yards in Seattle. McCoy ran for 50 yards. So it wasn't like, it's an inconsistency in the Eagles is what kills them. They can't go into, you know, can't win these big games and think you're one of the best teams, and you walk in and you just get walked all over by teams like Seattle.
Yeah, and to top it all off, after that Thanksgiving win against Dallas, this team was a 90% favorite to make the playoffs. 90%. It's pretty hard to mess up those odds, but I mean, the Eagles, through a combination of the secondary, of course, quarterback injuries and inconsistencies, and whatever you call it, it just all unfortunately crumbled apart. But I want to examine the head coach. I want to really take a nice look at Chip Kelly. So let's see the graphic. Overall, for his first couple years, not bad record, 20-12. Now he's head of player personnel after Howie Roseman awkwardly gets promoted. We'll get to that in a little bit. But let's talk about just overall, how's Chip Kelly as a coach over these first 2 years? I mean, 20-12, not a bad record to go 10-6 your first 2 years.
No, I think Chip Kelly is really an innovator in the NFL. He's definitely one of the top coaches. We see that in this game. The game's a lot faster. The referees aren't even in shape to keep up with the pace of the game. Other teams are. We've heard of players mic'd up, or even the offensive linemen for the Eagles, who some of the bigger guys in the game, they're in shape, and the other linemen are saying, "Well, we're dead. Like, we need a break." So Chip Kelly's really changed the face of the game, and we're already seeing that. Seattle worked very fast this past weekend. A lot of teams are trying to catch on to this now, and now it's going to be a time for Chip Kelly, whether or not he can step up again and readapt himself, because teams are coming in prepared to do this, and they're also doing it on offense. They're prepared on both sides of the ball for it too. But the one thing Chip Kelly really needs to improve on, I think, is his play selection. There's only 4 games this year which McCoy has ran over 100 yards. The other ones he was all less than 100 yards. So he's obviously favoring the air, which is what we saw Andy Reid get trouble into at the end of his tenure. So Chip Kelly needs to once again tweak his coaching style and once again set the bar a little bit higher.
You mentioned needing to adapt and needing to tweak the style. Jordan and Tommy, I'll talk to you guys about this. Do you think Chip's too stubborn and too proud? Because one of the things that irked me after the Washington game, the Monday press conference, he came out and said after Bradley Fletcher got burned back-to-back weeks by Des Bryant and Deshaun Jackson, he came out and said, Bradley Fletcher was low on confidence. If he's low on confidence, why is he on the football field? I mean, yeah, I know Brandon Boykin's only in select packages and situations right now, but you got to at least try something else if you know your starting corner who covers these big-time guys is low on confidence. So I think that falls on Chip Kelly. So do you guys think he's a little too proud in his selections?
I don't know if he's as stubborn as Andy Reid per se, but at the same time, he needs to be able to add wrinkles in from time to time. I didn't see enough of Sproles and McCoy in the backfield together
at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly, and I saw him kind of putting the quarterback in vulnerable positions, dropping back too much at say the Arizona game, for instance. So I think he just needs to continue to add wrinkles, because at the end of the day, if you really want to win in this league, I know that's cliche, in this league, you got to be able to punch it in, right, and in the red zone. And so far, as a head coach, he's been unable to do that. I give him credit because I feel the team has overachieved to an extent, but at the same time, expectations are going to really raise next year.
Yeah, Tommy, we mentioned earlier the fact that now Chip is head of player personnel. Now he's in charge of picking the new GM. Basically, he's second in command under Jeffrey Lurie. How do you feel about this? Because I don't know, I'm a little uneasy about it, because I mean, so much could go wrong, but so much can go right.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about it, because I think when he originally came over, you have to realize that a lot of people thought it was going to take a little bit longer because of the turnover that the team was going to need. I mean, for the new system, the style of quarterback, for goodness sakes, Nick Foles is not the guy that you would have in an Oregon system. He can't run, and neither was Mark Sanchez, let's be honest. But, like, that style, he hasn't really had the players he needs, so you can understand why he may be looking at Marcus Mariota, a guy that could run in that handoff, that style that you see Russell Wilson do with the Seahawks sometimes. So it's going to be interesting. Hopefully he picks some players that are going to fit what he wants to do. And, I mean, this is going to be his time, because if he's not able to do it now when he has basically the command, I mean, yeah, Howie Rose may have been promoted, but let's be honest, he was almost demoted at the same time.
Right.
So it's like, but, I mean, they're still looking for a GM, which is not the greatest in this time span when you're getting ready for the draft, so hopefully we'll find one soon. But I'm optimistic, and hopefully now he will get the players he wants and needs.
Yeah, I mean, he would recruit at Oregon. I mean, the guys, like some of the guys he recruited while he was still at Oregon, they were in the national championship game this year. So he's doing something right with his recruitment technique. So just whether or not that converts over to the NFL, we'll see.
Yeah, and we'll look at the Eagles more over the next couple weeks. We'll look at the quarterback situation, of course, the Mariota rumors, which are going to be running rampant until April, let's face it. We'll look into that in the next couple weeks. But for now, let's move to the Wells Fargo Center. Let's move to the orange and black. The Philadelphia Flyers have reached their all-star break, so let's see the graphic of how they've been doing so far. Very streaky team, 19, 22, and 7 at the all-star break, 12th in the Eastern Conference, 5th in the Metropolitan Division. This team can never really get on a run. They either win a game or two, and then they just fall right back off, and they'll lose 3 or 4, come back, maybe win 1. It's so much back and forth. Why is that?
I honestly don't know. I think part of it's with the revolving door they have at goalie. That was part of an issue. But you said, I think they're just streaky. They really are. I mean, they'll win 3 or they'll lose 3. Then they'll go back and win 2. And so it's just them trying to get that ball going, staying with that consistency. But between November 14th and December 13th, they went 4-11, and that's where they had almost 11 games in a row. They had one win separating 2 real losing streaks. So I think it's just they're just kind of playing streaky, and they might not have that missing piece to keep them from falling into those loss categories.
Right, Jordan?
I think they just lack a clear direction and identity at this point. There's flashes where you really like what you see, and they really compete, and they play a style that could really be beneficial to them. But at the same time, they'll just lay stinkers. So it's like there's just no consistency with this team, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt to an extent because they've shown they can make runs. They can get hot at the right time. They can sneak into the playoffs and beat good teams. But at the same time, I'm starting to think they're resting on their laurels a little bit in their ability to sneak into the playoffs. Maybe that's why they're kind of not taking the regular season as seriously as they need to be. But you still need to get into the playoffs first. And, every year is a different year. And I think they need to kind of get out the pass.
Tommy?
Yeah, I think it goes to a lot of, the fact that their personnel right now, they need scoring help. They won 2 straight games without even scoring a goal. You're seeing the likes of Giroux and Voracek playing very great. They're the best players on the team right now. Obviously Giroux just with the game-winning goal against the Penguins before the break. You're seeing some of the skills they have. But then when you mention, the goaltending situation, it's been a little shaky this whole year. And that's, last year you really were happy that you had great goaltenders. After when you had to deal with I forget his name. I don't even want to mention Brizgalov. Let's not even mention him. But
you said it.
I know.
You just did.
I was I put it on my mind. But yeah, definitely scoring is a factor that they really have to find some players.
You brought them up. Let's look at the 2 Flyers All-Stars, Voracek and Giroux. Jake Voracek, 17 goals, 39 assists, leading the NHL with 56 points. So obviously very great there. Claude Giroux, 16 goals, 35 assists, 5th in the NHL with 51 points. You guys said it yourselves. It's great that we have these 2 scorers, but in the same token, where else are we going to find scoring? Because the Schentz, the Couturiers, the Reeds have been coming up short.
Yeah, and that's really what's been hurting the Flyers. Is they need a 3rd and a 4th threat like that. Giroux and Voracek do a great job. They're very well what they do, and they're killing it because obviously they're all-stars. But the Flyers don't have another threat to take the attention away from the 2 of them. It's your puck's either going to go to Giroux or Voracek to score, and you cover those 2 guys, and then it's just kind of a toss-up to who might get the rebound or who's going to take that one-timer from way up top. So it's been really interesting to see how the Flyers try to adjust to this and maybe work in some of the other guys, like you said, the Couturiers, that don't see the puck a whole lot, but can become a threat if they just work on it for a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how long they stay with the younger guys and how patient they're going to be in their development. If they're really in like a win now mode, or if they're going to try to maybe make a move for somebody. But at this point, if you would have told me Voracek was going to play how he's played, and then we already knew what Giroux was bringing to the table going in. You know, you would think they'd be in a better position than they are now, but it just, again, the supporting cast has come up so short. And it's not that they lack talent per se, but again, you have to produce at the end of the day. So.
All right, and Tommy, you brought this up a little bit earlier, but inconsistency in goal. And let's bring up a reason why in Steve Mason. He's 8, 12, and 6 on the season, 247 goals against average. When he's been in that, he's been one of, if not the most consistent flyer, even when Drew and Voracek haven't been the most consistent. But Tommy, we'll start with you on this. How much has Steve Mason not being able to stay healthy hurt the Philadelphia Flyers?
I mean, it's definitely hurt him because Ray Emery has just not been good this year. I mean, nowadays, he's like, you don't really know where to put him in terms of him in goal. Even though they seem to score more goals when he's actually in that Ray Emery, when he's actually in it, the Flyers have actually scored more goals for him, but they'll still lose because he's been giving way too many goals for him. So it's definitely serious when you have a guy as good as Steve Mason was last year to come in and not be as healthy as you need him to be. And when you don't have the scoring you have, obviously giving up goals, you're not scoring enough, you're going to lose games.
Yeah, not only that, but when you have an injury-ridden defense that even when they're healthy will leave you out to dry some nights, because there are some nights when Steve Mason will make phenomenal saves and he'll give up 1 goal, but the Flyers offense just can't get anything. So, but I mean, Ray Emery had a bounce-back game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Rob Sepp, the 30-something-year-old rookie, kind of a Chris Coast-esque story, did very well. So, I mean, I don't know what will happen when Steve Mason gets back healthy, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with the orange and black after the All-Star break. But now we go on to the Philadelphia Phillies, a team who are in their off-season mode, but are starting to do a little housekeeping, and they're starting to do that with probably one of the greatest players in franchise history. Let's take a look at the graphic. I can never get used to looking at that, but Jimmy Rollins traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers for a couple prospects. Guys, let's just start with that. How weird is it to not see J-Roll in the Phillies uniform anymore?
It's definitely very strange because he was one of those guys you could always, whether watching the game at home or you're in the stadium, you knew he was going to be the first guy out there on the field. You knew that he was going to be someone you're definitely looking for. He was going to be the person you see that to really try to get the crowd going, get the lineup going. And it's just going to be very strange to not see him. And at least for my personally, my whole life, he was the staple in the Phillies uniform. So him not being there is a huge difference.
Yeah, just his brutal honesty and kind of giving us something to talk about. We didn't always have Papelbon in the media. Someone's got to say something dumb for us to talk about. So usually it would be Jimmy Rollins and his just brutal honesty, but that's gone now. And then say what you want about him, he took certain plays off, but he was a professional for the most part and a real leader for the team, where the team to be. And it kind of started with him. There was Chase, there was Ryan. They brought what they brought to the table, of course. But I always felt like he was kind of the personality of the team. So it's bittersweet, to see him go. But at the same time, they kind of need to go in a new direction.
Yeah, it's almost like it hasn't settled in yet, I guess, since the season is over now. And it's like you almost knew it was coming. You knew that eventually these guys are going to have to get traded just on what we've seen over the last 3-4 seasons now. You kind of knew they're going to have to trade some of these guys. But for him to be the first one, Jimmy Rollins, that always was the saying that when he goes, the team goes. To let him go first, and it wasn't on purpose. Maybe it was just like how it went. It just is how.
Yeah, of course he had his no trade clause.
Exactly. Too. But but to see him on the Dodgers, a team that, NLCS hitting that double and then goes to third base to win that game. It's going to be tough seeing him in the Dodgers.
It's going to be very tough. Obviously, Jimmy Rollins, one of the top Phillies all time, of course. This past year, breaking Mike Schmidt's all-time hit record for the team. So no doubt he'll be in the Phillies Hall of Fame one day. But I want to bring up this graphic and make a comparison of Jimmy Rollins to Ozzie Smith because I want to know from you guys, is Jimmy Rollins a Hall of Famer? Jimmy Rollins, 267 average, 2,306 hits, a .983 fielding percentage and 4 Gold Gloves. Comparing that to Ozzie Smith, 262 average, .62 average, 2,460 hits, .974 fielding percentage, and of course 13 Gold Gloves. That's uncanny. I don't even know if that's a fair comparison. But offensively at least, and somewhat defensively, Jimmy Rollins has similar numbers. So this debate's been going on for a little bit. But do you guys think Jimmy Rollins will make his way to Cooperstown one day?
I think he's a maybe at best. Maybe at best. You look at his stuff and you compare it to all-time leaders. He doesn't crack the top 50 in any category offensively. So it's a little hard to justify putting him in when there's people who are that much better than him in every category. If you're in the middle of the field in some of the categories, such as doubles or triples, okay. But when you're not in the top 50, and those things were kind of at least in Phillies fan aspect, those were what he was really known for. And you don't crack the top 50 in MLB all time, you really don't have a place in the Hall. But with that being said, I think his personality and being who he was, being Jimmy Rollins and being this great figure, that's where it's going to give him that little bump up towards the Hall. But he's still maybe at best.
Jordan?
Well, I'll admit I'm biased, but at the same time, if you have to think about whether they belong in the Hall of Fame, they probably don't belong in the Hall of Fame. At the same time, you look at, you look at the numbers that he put up. They're so unique for his position, like across the board, that I think you kind of have to give him the edge, especially in the steroid era of baseball.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of tough to kind of decide on whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame or not, because it is such a debating topic on the terms of his offensive numbers kind of fell off so much over his latter years. I think after like the 2009, 2010 season, he had some he kind of just became inconsistent. But I think winning an MVP in 2007, being a part of a club that not too many people are in that year when he had like 20 homers, 20 triples, 20 doubles, at least 20 steals and things like that, that's like a small club to be a part of that year. For the fact of what he did, winning a World Series for the Phillies, and then, hey, I mean, he's on the Dodgers now. He could very likely win another World Series, because we know how when people leave the Phillies, they go on to win World Series.
Oh, he'll be motivated.
People leave Philadelphia, they win championships.
Yeah, it's just they
It's a
wouldn't.
scientific fact.
Yeah, they just do. So I wouldn't be shocked. So
He's got the
I think
accolades.
he's close. He's very close.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
what Tommy said, towards now he's in the latter end of his career, I don't think Rollins is going to be putting up as
Yes.
great numbers. Obviously, 07 was his best year. He won
Yes.
Silver Slugger, Golden Glove, and MVP. I mean, those years, and you proceed to win the Golden Glove in 08 and 09 and
Yes.
12 as well. But I think those years, that's where his peak is. So at this point, it's just kind of a little cushioning to his career. He's not going to do anything big here on out,
All right, and
unfortunately.
All right, so the jury's still out on Rollins, but real quick, let's take a look at the Phillies ace, Cole Hamels. Yes, still in Phillies pinstripes, despite all the rumors of him being traded to either Texas or Boston, Los Angeles, San Diego. Look at those numbers, 9-9, 2.46 ERA, 198 strikeouts. How surprised are you that Cole Hamels hasn't been dealt yet?
I'm a little surprised. I mean, we've talked about in the past how Ruben Amaro set his price real high for these players. But also on the other end of it, Hamels, he's still 31, so he still has some years left on him. He has a super high contract of $23.5 million a year. So that's a pretty big chunk of change for a team to take on. Obviously, the Phillies have to pay part of it, which the Phillies might not be in a position to do. But with that being said, he's still a top pitcher in the league. But I think what affects him the most, besides Ruben Amaro asking for too much in a huge contract, is that the Phillies themselves haven't been playing well. He was one of the top pitchers in the entire league the past couple of years, with what they consider good outings, and that sort of thing, going like 7 innings, whatever. But he's always on the top for that. But because the Phillies didn't give him the offense support he needs, he dropped a little bit. So until the Phillies improve, I don't think he'll get as much as he should go for.
Yeah, I would say teams are kind of playing chicken at this point. I think teams definitely want Cole because he's still fairly young in his prime. He played great last year. His contract compared to other great pitchers, it's pretty reasonable, I would say. And then the Phillies are obviously rebuilding, so teams know that. So it's kind of just a game of chicken, and it's like teams say, okay, let's sign a guy in free agency. Let's wait it out. If they can wait it out, they're going to wait it out. They're just going to try to lowball him, and then Ruben's obviously going to highball him. And so it's just a game of chicken, but I'm not too shocked because we know Ruben kind of has an attachment to his guys, and it took a lot to trade Jimmy. It's going to take a lot to trade anyone else, for that matter.
I mean, you're right about that. So we'll see. We'll keep you updated in the offseason if Cole Hamels gets dealt, or if it happens in the middle of the season. We'll be sure to keep you updated here on Sports Talk Philadelphia. But it's time for the Fast Five, and we start with Tommy McIntyre. A little bit of an interesting conflict in the media this week between Michael Carter-Williams and Nerlens Noel, with Nerlens Noel wanting the ball more down low. It kind of blew over already, but should this be a concern moving forward, or should we just blow it off?
I mean, they're friends. I mean, they played AAU ball together. I mean, they have a history. I mean, they earlier in the season, they got in a little scuffle between another, like before the game, early in the game, one of their games, and they wound up winning that game of their like 7 wins they have. So it's like I mean, when you're this bad of a team and you're so young and you're used to being a really good player and winning in college and things of that nature, it's tough for you right now to not be winning games. So obviously, anything they think can help them win is going to get it. But I think they're going to get us together in terms of that relationship. Yeah,
not only that, but I kind of like that Nerlens Noel showing, a bit of, I guess, passive aggression, if you will, because it shows that he still wants to compete. And if they get this out now, by the time they're able to get going and try to go back up in the league again, it should be good. All right, Mark, both the Pro Bowl and the NHL All-Star game is this weekend. but which sport of all the major four has the best All-Star game?
Definitely MLB. MLB ties into the season that whatever league wins that All-Star game, that team in the World Series has home advantage. The MLB just makes it a lot bigger. I mean, the guys want to be there. They want to play hard. They want to win the game because there's that advantage tied to it. Plus, the MLB takes like the home run derby into it as well. So it's just a bigger stage, and guys want to be there. Unlike the Pro Bowl this week, not to knock it, but
where everybody dropped out.
Players don't want to drop out. The teams don't want them playing. They don't want to get hurt, and they do play. They go half speed, so it's just not a fun game to watch. So MLB is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Jordan Green, how great are those Chip Kelly Tostitos chips commercials? Did you see any of them?
I think he deserves an Oscar. He's on the come up. Seriously, I was impressed. He didn't do the greatest
so out
job.
of character.
I was just surprised he put himself out there like that. You know, he seems like a very serious kind of introverted guy, but he gave it a shot. So
yeah, Mark, your Eagles MVP for this season.
Darren Sproles. I mean, he was a big name at times. Other times he wasn't big, but him coming in, taking some pressure off McCoy, doing special teams was a huge help to the Eagles this year.
I agree with that. And Tommy, you get the last question. Will Jeremy Maclin be an Eagle next year?
I believe so. I mean, what he was able to do for the Eagles this year, coming off an ACL tear, I think that was incredible. And you're going to need a star receiver right now because, I mean, the likes of Riley Cooper, only having him would be scary. And Matthews is very good too. I think he'll improve. But you need Maclin to come back.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not only that, but Maclin said, hey, I want to be here. The Eagles said, hey, we'll take him. I don't see why they wouldn't find middle ground on like a 2-3 year deal. All right, well, that's going to do it for us this week here on Sports Talk Philadelphia. But you can keep track with us on any form of social media, facebook.com/SportsTalkPhiladelphia. On Twitter, you can hit us up at LaSalle TV Philly. For email, lasalletv@lasalle.edu. You can see all our episodes on YouTube, youtube.com/LaSalle56TV. And our general home on the web, lasalle.edu/LaSalleTV. Well, thank you to Mark, Jordan, and Tommy for coming on the show today. And thank you all for tuning in. I'm Tyler Harper. Thanks for watching Sports Stuff Philadelphia. We'll see you next week.